Welcome to episode 5 of D3, Dominici's Discussions and Debates. I'm your host, Dominici Lapierre. Today is November 18th, 2025, and I'm joined by Dr. Richard Clark of Clarendon, Vermont. Dr. Clark is a professor of political science at VTSU Castleton, as well as an exceptionally accomplished poll and survey researcher and a published writer. Thank you for being here with me.
It's my pleasure.
I'm really excited to get into this talk, and if you're listening right now, hi Mom. To start, you're from Los Angeles. What are some of the differences you notice, whether it be, the climate might be an obvious one, or socially, any kind of major differences you notice from where you were raised versus here in Castleton, Vermont?
Oh, yeah, it's worlds apart in terms of the culture. First off, when I first came out east from Los Angeles, the thing that bothered me, I couldn't sleep when it was quiet. I grew up next to a heliport, and there was always noise, traffic or the helicopters, and so getting used to kind of having space and having quiet used to freak me out. Love it now.
Yeah, my father lives in Brooklyn, and I notice this the opposite. Anytime I go to visit him and I hear the noise, because I'm from upstate New York where it's rural, I can't, man. It kills me. All the noises, the dogs barking, the random crashing, it just, oh.
Right.
So would you say, overall, you prefer Castleton, Vermont, or in this area at least, or where you're from?
Oh, I would never go back. I left Los Angeles after I was 23 or so when I left there. So my father, my siblings, or most of them are all still out there. I love LA. I'm a huge Dodger fan, and
we have that in here.
I am never abandoning the boys in blue. But as far as ever moving back, that's just not in the cards. My wife is a New Englander. We love it out here. Prior to coming to Vermont, we were 10 years at University of Georgia, and my wife kind of saw that as exile from New England. She was dying to get back here, so I think we're here for the long run now.
It's definitely, I am from New York, which technically doesn't count as New England, but
right.
I don't know, I love this upper East Coast area. I think it's just one of the better regions in the state. I mean, I'm biased. I haven't been to any other ones, but I'll say it's the best.
Aside from the billboards, I don't know what the difference is really between a lot of upper state New York. Well, the politics, but the between upper state New York and Vermont. I mean,
it's really similar.
Yeah,
it's very similar.
The Adirondacks are a little rougher than the Greens, but that's about it.
I'm from right in the middle of the Adirondacks. I love it. And we actually had a question. Your wife's a librarian, correct?
That's correct.
So clearly, academia is like probably a huge part of your guys' life. You're both very scholarly people from what I could find. And how did you two meet? And how did that happen?
Undergrads.
Okay.
Yeah, we met. I had a huge crush on a woman who lived next door to her in the dorms, and things turned. And she was dating a guy who lived in the dorms next to me. But over time, she and I got to know each other, became good friends, and after that, we started dating, and 5 years later, married, and
That's awesome.
Now 2 kids, and we've been married 32 years now.
Oh, congratulations. Where does she work now?
Rutland Free Library.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. So you have 2 children. They're both adults, right?
Yeah.
Tell me about them. What are they doing now?
Well, one's a teacher. She was in Brattleboro, working on her special education license. My son and his wife live in Littleton, Colorado, just outside of Denver. He works for a credit union. She works for a bank. She does cybersecurity. He does customer service stuff.
Wow, okay, that's pretty cool. So, I noticed that, when I was doing research, someone had wrote an article about caffeine, and you guys did a poll at some point about caffeine and coffee consumption. So I figured I'd just ask you, how much coffee do you drink, and how do you like it? I'm not a coffee drinker, but some people take this seriously.
I drink far less coffee than I used to. Coffee got me through graduate school. But I, full disclosure, I had 5 cups today. I'm done. I mean, 5 cups as far as the coffee machine declares it, which I think that's 2.5 cups or so. But yeah, no, I like my coffee.
So what you're saying is the key to being a good political science professor is caffeine.
I think the key for me just being up and about is caffeine. Yeah.
So, and you already mentioned this, but it came up a few times that you're a big Dodgers fan.
Yeah.
How do you, now that you live in Vermont, do you go to any other games still?
Try to get to a couple a year. Last year I saw them in Colorado and then Kansas City. So usually get on the road and see them at least a couple times a year on the road. I haven't been back to Dodger stadiums in a long time, but there's a huge following of the Dodgers. So you get into town, there'll always be these other people in their Dodger blue get-ups. And, I've seen them Houston recently and in Philadelphia. So, when they come around, I follow.
Did you see your son? You said you went to Colorado.
Yeah. No, my son and his wife are also big Dodger fans.
Well, that makes me wonder, do you have any grandchildren yet?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, and do you have any other sports or hobbies that people wouldn't really know as much about, or nah?
No, this is why I will never retire. I really have no hobbies, and baseball, which is my big passion, takes place over the summer, so it doesn't interfere with my teaching.
Okay, so moving into your education, you got your Ph.D. from the University of Connecticut.
Go Huskies, yeah.
So what was that in? Was that in research or poll researching?
Well, it was in political science, but it was there that the University of Connecticut used to host a archive called the Roper Center, which is the largest public opinion archive in the world. It's called the Roper Center because it was started by Elmer Roper and George Gallup, and with that being there, UConn kind of became one of those hubs for survey research. After I got my Ph.D., I was on the faculty as a visiting professor there at UConn, and I taught and then the year before I left was the interim director for the Masters of Survey Research program that they had.
Okay, and why did you choose political science? What kind of
I love politics. Yeah, so I'm first generation college. I got out of high school and I was working in sporting goods. There's a big chain in Los Angeles called Big Five Sporting Goods, and I was in the management program there. And the problem with being in sporting goods is it's really difficult to meet girls. So I thought, well, if I take classes at night, I was in California, and the community college system, tuition's $50 a semester. So it was easy. It was easy to get classes in. Wow. And so I took a number of classes. I didn't meet a lot of women, to be frank, but I enjoyed the classes that I took. And I was kind of directionless. I wandered into a political science class, and like, click. I was fascinated. I was interested, in the study of power and the international relations and just how government works. And it was not something, I did not come from a political household. We didn't talk about politics or so. And I was just fascinated by the subject and took it from there.
That's awesome. So before we talk about your career, I just, for the audience, I'll list some of your accolades / accomplishments off.
That shouldn't take long.
No, stop. I want you to know I cut quite a bit off. This is, you founded the Peach State Poll in 2001, which was a opinion survey in Georgia. You were a co-editor of Polling America, an encyclopedia of public opinion. You founded the Castleton Polling Institute in 2012, which we'll get into more later. You already mentioned this, but you were a research associate at the Roper Center for Public Opinion from 96 to 99, I believe. And you also conducted the presidential primary favorite poll in 2020. And was that in accordance with VPR, or did they just cover the story?
No, I was doing it for them.
Okay.
It was VPR and Vermont Public Television kind of had merged by that point, so I was the pollster for them.
Okay, and just to we'll touch on it now since we're there, but you also, like I said, you were the founding director of the Castleton Polling Institute. Are you still the director of that?
It doesn't exist anymore.
Oh,
The
what happened?
President Scolforo, in her wisdom, closed it while I was here, and
Wisdom's
yeah,
one word.
and so that's when I went on and I was doing the working with VPR and public television independently.
Okay, that's awesome though. Like like when I was looking for accomplishments to list, because I usually list like if I have a writer some works, there was a lot. I was very very intrigued by a lot of your stuff. So you began being a professor in 2001, and you were the interim director. I don't know if you were a professor, but you were an interim director of the master's program of survey research at the University of Connecticut. How did you get in that spot?
Well, I got my Ph.D. from UConn, and I was living in Storrs, Connecticut, and they hired me back to teach some courses. I was teaching every semester the American Foreign Policy course for them while I was a graduate student, and even after. So they hired me back as a visiting professor. And it was a non-tenure track gig. It was meant to be temporary, but I was filling in sort of holes that they had while faculty was out on sabbatical or they were hiring. And while I was there, I was teaching a methods course in the survey research program. And while I was there, the director of the program left to take a job in Minnesota, so they needed somebody to fill in there. And so that's where I stepped in, and I was young and I was just starting my career, and it was like, okay, I'll do this in interim, but then I got to leave UConn. I mean, you can't be the student there and then try to be colleagues with the people who were your professors. That becomes really difficult, and it was time to kind of break out on my own after that.
Did you like Connecticut? Did you like
Love it?
UConn?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, love it. Yeah. I'm a big Husky fan too. For me it was as a first generation student, I got to meet the professors. They took a real interest in me. I had an assistantship, which allowed me to get through my graduate program with a stipend, and
Wow.
some of the best insurance coverage I've ever had in my life came to me as a graduate student, surprisingly. But it was good for me. I learned a lot. I was grateful for it. I loved being a student, and they kind of had to push me out, and say, it's about time you quit taking classes and go out and do something on your own.
That's awesome, though. We have some teammates. I'm on the wrestling team from Connecticut, and we stop there on our way back from tournaments and stuff. And it is a nice area.
Yeah.
So a lot of the areas in that state are beautiful.
Yeah, they used to call it snores, derisively, the students did, because there didn't used to be a lot there. It has built up a lot since I've left. It's become a lot bigger and a lot more exciting place to be.
Oh, yeah. After you worked at UConn, you then went to the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at the University of Georgia, and you worked there from 2001 to 2010, correct?
Yeah, 2011. I was there for 10 years. Yeah.
And what was that experience like? And what was kind of dive into that?
Well, it was fascinating. It was working with a lot of state governments. I taught some graduate courses. Occasionally an undergraduate course, but mostly working with graduate students. And working with state government, I actually had, you mentioned earlier, the Peach State poll. It was a poll that I ran really with legislative research dollars. In other words, the legislature was paying for me to conduct these polls. So that was really fascinating. And we didn't do the horse race questions, who's up and who's down in the elections, but we did policy questions, looking into a lot of issues around, whether it be education or expanding services. Or while I was there, they changed the flag. That was a huge issue. Got rid of the Confederate symbol on the Georgia flag.
I think I remember.
And so that was something that really triggered a lot of debate. I actually started that poll, if you believe it. I went into the field on September 9th, 2001.
Wow.
And then the world changed. A couple days later, I was using a phone center that was located in Princeton, New Jersey, so they had to shut down entirely. And ended up moving our phone service, the data collectors, to an organization that was operating in Tennessee, because I found that when you're polling in the South, you want interviewers that say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, and have that Southern drawl so that the people we're calling feel a lot more, that let somebody reaching them who knows their world and not somebody from Princeton, New Jersey,
Do you think that 9/11 changed any or affected any of the results of that at all? Or
Oh, absolutely did. Just polling, I mean, everything, attitude about government changed on that day. I mean, George Bush, if you think about it, George W. Bush was seen kind of as an illegitimate president after the 2000 election debacle.
All the miscounts, right?
Yeah, and the recounts in Florida and the Supreme Court ruling. But after 9/11, public rallied behind the president. We call it rally around the chief phenomena. And his approval ratings went up. Approval of the Congress went up. Everybody was gung-ho to support the administration. And that filtered down through state government as well. We just saw, everybody put on their flag lapel pins and got extremely hyper-patriotic for a little while.
My senior year of high school, we actually talked about that. And just to get into that a little bit, it might be a side tangent, but do you believe that had they had a better system when they were doing the paper voting and it would have lined up better, or the problems that were caused that made them revote, do you think there would have been any legitimate difference in that election?
Yes.
You think so?
Oh, absolutely. I don't want to go too deep into the weeds on this, but, first off, what was interesting is, one of the ways we determined problems with the poll is undervotes. The idea that you would have fewer votes on the presidential level than you would down ballot, because people show up at presidential elections quite often to vote for the president. And Georgia had a higher rate of undervotes than Florida did. And so Georgia, the Secretary of State, said, oh, my God, but therefore the grace of God go I. If it was close in Georgia, she would have been under the scrutiny that we saw Catherine Harris in Florida under. But, it wasn't just that it was, a state that is that large with so many electoral votes on the margin that it was won by, about 400 votes. But in Palm Beach, there was something called the butterfly ballot, a poorly designed ballot. This is not a Republican hoax or anything. It was Democrats who designed the ballot themselves, designed it such that the second hole, I mean, if you were reading down on the left side, it looked like the top hole was what you punched for. You use these little punch cards. The top hole was for voting for Bush.
Bad.
What's that?
That's bad. I looked it up.
Yeah,
That's bad.
yeah.
That's bad.
And then the second hole, people thought, obviously, would be for Al Gore. And in fact, it was for Pat Buchanan, whose name was listed on the other side of the fold. And when you see a picture of it, you don't get the sense, you don't realize it, but they're sheets that move and they can be readjusted. And so the arrows don't actually line up perfectly with the holes. So we don't know the number, but if you use, just a simple regression, statistical regression, you would never predict Pat Buchanan, this kind of white nationalist candidate, to do extremely well in this Democratic Palm Beach than he did. And Pat Buchanan himself recognized, he said, those were not votes for me.
Yeah.
That was an error.
Yeah.
Had that not been in place, we wouldn't be talking about the 400-point difference, because Gore would have won that and he would have won the election. It would have been over.
Again, and if questions are too deep and we don't have time to get to them in an hour, tell me to move on. But
sure.
What do you think really would have been different in response? Do you think, or how do you think things would have been different had Gore won?
Yeah. I don't believe there's a lot. I don't believe it's very fruitful to do that sort of alternative history, if Gore would have won. But, people who have done that and wrote on that, talk about differences in environmental policy we would have pursued. And would we have gone into Iraq and lost all that, blood and treasure? I mean, just the number of men and women who were killed in that battle. Probably not. We probably would never have gone into Iraq following the 9/11 tragedy. Would 9/11 probably have happened? Absolutely. I think that was in the works before the election.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about that because I wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
And I hear people talk about that and like the things you could do before, like the way how lax like TSA wasn't a thing yet,
Yeah.
how lax airports were, and I just can't fathom that because I've never seen it not be as intensive at airports and stuff,
Right.
at least as it is now.
And it's not just airport. I mean, you could just take your driver's license and cross the border into Canada back then. You didn't need the passport. And
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
yeah, and so a lot of our lives have changed. The metal detectors and going into state houses and courtrooms and such that may not have been there prior to 9/11. The airport ones are dramatic, and they're the ones we remember most. But that wasn't the only difference that we experienced.
One more tangent question.
Yeah.
This is something I usually ask people anytime 9/11 gets brought up because people always seem to remember in depth. What were you doing when you found out about the attacks on the towers?
I was at work at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government. I don't remember his name. I thought I would always connect him with that, and his name has slipped away from me. Somebody I wrote an article with years later, but walked in and told me what had happened, and I was kind of incredulous. And I had my wife's best friend's husband, if you can follow that, worked in the financial district. So our first concern was,
Wow.
is Bill okay? So Janet, my wife, called her friend Donna, who is a runner. She's one of those insane, the people that do those 100-mile runs.
Wow.
And those
super marathons.
super marathons. Yeah, I don't understand why anyone would do that. But anyway, so she was out running when she saw the smoke, and she said, and because they lived in Weehawken, right across the river, and so it was at that time, and so it was really. But Bill had come home and was safe, and
Well, that's good to hear, though.
Yeah.
That he made it home.
yeah, and I mean, on such a tragic day, it was good to have a little bit of good news. Yeah.
100%. Reverting off my side tangent, after you worked at Georgia, you from 2001 to 11, you then came here to Castleton,
Mm-hmm.
and two things: how did that happen, and why did it happen?
So the idea when we moved from Connecticut out to Georgia, my wife was not thrilled with the idea of leaving New England, where she's from, where her family was, And so the idea was it might be 2 or 3 years and then see what other opportunities come about. After 3 years, I got an offer from University of Maryland, Baltimore County. They were starting a polling institute. And Georgia made me a counteroffer. And so they made it really, enticing to stay. And I liked it. I liked the people. My kids were in school. We were doing well. So we ended up there for 10 years. But the promise to my wife was that if anything opened up in New England, I would look at it. I interviewed and was up for a job when Monmouth Institute opened up their polling institute. I was a finalist for that.
Where is that? I'm sorry, I haven't heard.
Monmouth, New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
They were, and then Siena College had a polling institute, and I interviewed for that one as well. We got a friend sent me a note that this place in Vermont, I don't know that I'd ever been to Vermont before, was starting at this place called Castleton. Never heard of it. And so, because of the promise to my wife, I said, well, I'll go out there and, I'll apply. And then I got a call. They wanted me to fly out and interview. And, the best time, and this for you or anybody else, the best time to look for a new job is when you don't need a job. You know, it's hard to look for a job when you're desperate, when you want a job.
Yeah.
So I didn't need a job. I didn't want a job, but I had a promise made to my wife, and I flew out here. And I got here. It was May. It was Mother's Day weekend, so I also left her behind on Mother's Day. But and my kids were going into, at that time, 7th grade and 9th grade, and we really wanted to. We made a promise. We weren't going to move the kids once they started high school, because that would be just too. So this was it. You move this year or never, right? Or I mean, not never, but we'd have to wait another 6 years until my son would be done. And so so I came out here, and it was May. It was beautiful out, and I came to the university for my interview on the Monday. I met the president we had at that time was a guy named Dave Walk. He told me, he said, "Rich, we don't want a workaholic. We want a role model for our students." And they had done their research on me. They knew I was very involved with my kids' lives, and that was important to me. And so, they made sure that was that I would have that sort of time in my life for them. The department chair at the time was a guy named John Spiro, who then later was an interim president here. I hit it off with him. I was just really impressed. And then I got on the plane to fly, coming back from and I was like, oh, darn, I want this job now. It switched. Now I'm thinking I can really see myself here. And so by the time the whole interview process, this 2-day process was done, said and done, I was really hoping they would make me the offer, and they did. And, I took it. I don't know if students are where, the pay for a faculty member at Castleton is not quite at the same range as other places. So it was a big decision for my wife and I to come out here. But, and so we took a pay cut. We came out here, and the kids started at a new schools. And after about a year into it, it was like, no regrets. This was the right thing.
You knew it was for you?
Yeah, my kids were happier. It was the right move for them as far as they were both concerned. My wife was much happier, and she ended up getting a job at Rutland Free Library. And things just kind of fell into place with us. It was a change of lifestyle in so many ways, and no regrets at all, and been happy here ever since.
Have you been in Clarendon since you've been to Vermont, or where did you live when you first moved here?
Clarendon.
Oh, okay.
We went to all the various schools to see where my kids were at that time really into music, and the music program at Mill River High School was just fabulous, and we really thought about it hard. And at that time, while there is school choice, we didn't know. We've seen in Georgia sometimes school choice programs be pulled away, and then you'd be stuck going to whatever school it was in your town, and or county when you're south. But we didn't want to risk that, so we ended up buying in Clarendon, where we wanted the kids to go to school.
Okay, I didn't even know that. They I think it's Mill River. I think they play their football games here sometimes.
They do. Well, the field has been their field has been decimated. Full disclosure, I'm also on the school board for Mill River Union right now. So, but their athletic field had been decimated from just the drought and some of the drainage issues and things. Yeah, so they have been playing games out here.
I'm pretty sure their coach though used to wrestle for us. So when they
Is that right?
Here, yeah, our whole team, when they come here, we get our whole team out there, and some of the coaches go. And
go Minutemen! All right,
absolutely,
cool.
Go Minutemen! And moving on with your career, what about surveying and polling sparks your passion so much, as opposed to maybe other methods of research and things like that?
Well, so yeah, I believe in democracy. I believe democracy is really important. And when you ask me about democracy, I will tell you it's all about process. Process matters. Process matters more than outcome. if you do things in the right process. That's how science works. Science is about process. And so I loved just survey research methodology and just social science methodology, because it's about establishing a process, and whatever the findings are, they are, those that are best substantiated by the best methods we know. Well, I got into the public opinion and using that because in a democracy, it's important that we understand what the public wants. If you're representing the public, if the government is representative of the public, it should have a good idea of what the public preferences are, what issues concern the public, etc. And polling gives us access into that. And I've just been completely fascinated with that as a field of study, in that we have new issues that arise every day. How do people, today I've read that there's another attempt by the Trump administration. We were talking 9/11 earlier. I suppose it's on my mind. By the Trump administration to close the Department of Education. Well, how do people feel about that? What's Americans' opinion on that, and why? And those sorts of questions intrigue me. I want to know what others think. I want to hear the thoughts of my fellow countrymen. And public opinion allows us to kind of collect that information without bias in a broad sense. And the public isn't one mind on anything, but majority opinion matters a great deal in any democracy. And so I like to keep my eye on where the public temperature is on any given issue.
Okay. And you also I believe you also have a specialty, or not a specialty, but you form and moderate a lot of focus groups.
Yeah.
Is there, is it kind of the same ideology that gets you into that, or do you have different things you like about focus groups as opposed to?
I think if survey research or polling is a hammer, focus group is a wrench. It's just another tool. And if I want to know what the public thinks, I want to do a poll. If I want to know generally how demographics differ on a given issue, I want to do a poll. But if I want to know why people feel this and where they form this opinion, I really need to do a focus group. I need qualitative research. I need to have those broader discussions. And so focus groups really get into the nitty gritty of how people form their ideas. And in addition to that, what I love most off is that a survey, if I'm calling you up, or if you're sitting at a computer desk doing a survey, you're doing it in isolation. Politics doesn't happen in isolation. We have politics with one another in a forum. And so the focus group is that opportunity for people to talk about their opinions and then bounce off one another. So the first, when somebody says, I really think, my concern about the closing of the Department of Education is who's going to look out for students with special needs. And then somebody else in the group might say, I hadn't thought of that. That is really interesting. I know I have a nephew with special needs. I didn't realize that their education was being funded often with federal dollars. And those conversations are allowed to occur, and people can shape and reshape their opinions together collectively in a focus group. And that can't happen in a poll or survey.
That's a good point. So, this might be kind of again, if there's no answer, just tell me. Overall, if you had to pick process, do you prefer the surveys and polls or the focus groups?
You're asking me to choose which child I love most.
Well, that's
but if the research question is really about why in depth, I'm going to go for the qualitative method of the focus group. If the research question is about to what extent or how much and how many, I'm probably going to go for the poll. And so they're just different tools. I don't like my hammer more than my wrench, and if I'm going to be doing a little bit of plumbing, my hammer is going to only cause bigger problems.
That's a good point. Thank you so much. That's a great answer. What would you say your favorite medium of survey? Unless I'm asking you to pick your favorite type of round. But like, do you prefer doing paper surveys with people, or do you prefer the telephone or the mail or the web? Which ones do you know?
It's not a preference anymore. It's about where we are in terms of communications, right? We started. The polling industry really started, kind of face to face, door to door, using live interviewers through the Gallup process, where they would show up in a town and they would have certain quotas that they would have to meet. And then later it was certain addresses that would be selected from the Postal Service lists. And then when American Public was adopting telephones, and there were dedicated telephone lines in the majority of American households. In the 1970s, it approached over 90% of American households had a telephone. It became the most efficient way of reaching the public. And we developed these methods called random digit dial, which allowed us to do a random sample of households. And so it just became the best way to get a good random sample of the American public in a pretty expedient method. And over time, as people I'll tell you what, when the answering machine, those cassette answering machines came about, we thought, oh God, that's the death of polling. And we got around that. We survived that. And then when cell phones came about, we thought, oh God, there's the death of polling. However, we started including cell phone samples in that, and we're able to go on through the phone. But now, I'm going to bet you don't answer your phone if you don't know who's calling, do you?
Funny enough, I don't, but I do if I have time. I actually do polls.
Okay, good on you.
I'll give you this. And one time I was rushing, but I sat there for 15 minutes before I had to practice, and I did the whole poll with a lady about my health and my vaccinations.
Oh, and that was the CDC.
Yes.
Yeah, those are important polls because they give us a sense of how, if we want herd immunity, if we want to make sure that we have a certain percentage population vaccinated, those CDC polls give us that information. So, well, thank you for participating.
Well, it seemed like no one had been answering because I could just tell by her voice she seemed drained, and I was like, you know what? I'll give you the 15 minutes.
Have you heard of Pew Research Center?
I have not. What is this?
They're a major research center, and they do a lot of polling. And they're one of the few that will actually print what their response rate is. Their response rate for most polls is 9%.
Wow, 9%.
Yeah, which means that, the majority of Americans are either not picking up or refusing to participate. And that creates a real problem for what we're thinking of as a random sample, a scientific sample. And so that's why I'm giving you the roundabout answer to your question about which mode of surveys I think is best. It's that we need to reach people where they are. So because a lot of young people aren't picking up their cell phones, we started including text-based responses in a number of polls as well. So the polling methodology continues to morph as different modes of communication. And like I say, we were all in our homes and responding, or then we were all on our telephones responding. Now, there is no one way anymore to reach all Americans. And so we have to have these multi-methods surveys where we reach some people by text, some people on the internet, some people on their phones.
That's a good point. I mean, I try. I'll be real. I don't always, but I do try.
Well, back when CBS and a number of the New York Times and a number of polling places started using these random digit dial and calling households, response rates were in the high 80s.
Wow.
People thought it was their duty if the phone was ringing to pick it up and then to respond to whoever was on the other end. And that doesn't exist anymore. In part, it's because people are over polled too. People, buy a pair of shoes. We wanted you to fill out this survey, and get your Taco Bell. And there's a survey at the bottom here to complete, and we're just way over surveyed. And, it really kind of deadens people's desire to respond.
Oh, 100%. I noticed that too in a lot of places now. Moving forward with your polling work. In your career, what are some notable polls, surveys, or focus groups that you've moderated that come to mind? And to add to that, which are some notably that have given you some of the most either intriguing or shocking results? Like you weren't expecting it, or you know what I mean? The answers were just really fascinating with what you got out of it.
Yeah. Good question. And I'm going to give you the top of mind answer. I'm probably going to be thinking about this later today and thinking, wow, because I've done hundreds of polls. I read I'm that. I'm not a young guy anymore, and I've done it a long time.
Like a day over 25.
But I had once done this work for. I was working in Georgia. They passed a new law. It's called the 7 Deadly Sins, and the law would have meant that prosecutors can choose whether to prosecute minors, anybody 14 to 18 years of age, as an adult if they committed, in the 7 deadly sins, it was aggravated assault, murder, rape. It was a handful of different crimes. Okay. And I was working with this organization on juvenile justice, and they wanted to see how people thought about the law. And so as I was putting together a survey, I thought, what do I call them? A 14-year-old? Is it a child? Is it a juvenile? Youth? Young adult? I mean, what I call them may matter. It might shape how we see them. So I built a random survey into the survey. So as people were taking the survey, they would randomly be assigned a question that said, do you think children age 14 who commit one of these crimes should be prosecuted as an adult? And then, or randomly, you might get the question that says, do you think juveniles age 14 might? And turned out what we called them mattered a great deal how people thought about the issue. When we used the word children, people were far less likely to say we should prosecute them as adults. When we used the word juvenile, they thought, if a kid can commit this crime, if a juvenile can commit this crime, not a child, but a juvenile, they were far more likely to favor trying them as an adult. And I had anticipated that it might make a difference, but it made a larger difference than I had anticipated. And so when you think about kind of the practical application of this, if you are in court, this child, the 15-year-old, the 14-year-old now, we refer to them constantly, especially if it's a jury trial, because people are going to respond to the term child as opposed to often, and I've heard this once in a focus group, if what follows juvenile is delinquent.
Yeah.
Juvenile is not a term that we use unless there's some misbehavior involved.
100%. I was thinking that too. The first thing I think is juvie.
Yeah.
The first thing that came to my mind.
Exactly.
And following that, which of your poll studies or focus groups have had the strongest results or projections with the least accuracy? So, for example, if you did like a poll and you thought one politician was going to win an election, and then they got blown out of the water or something like that.
So I have a perfect record.
None at all.
But by a hair, it was actually, and part of it is my naivete that if I explained the nuance of this, that people wouldn't run too far with it. But it was a attorney general's race here in Vermont. I'm going to fail to remember the candidates' names, but we did in a state primary. We checked to see who people supported in the Democratic primary, and what turned out was that state primaries are very low turnout elections. Usually about 20-25% of the voters actually turn out there, and of course some of them are going to vote in the Republican ballot, so that's even a smaller number voting in the Democratic ballot. And the person who our polls showed was going to win, we had him winning by a fairly decent margin. He was the incumbent, so name recognition, of course, played into that. And he turned out winning by a hair's breadth, keeping his job by a very, very slim margin. And so I really had to. But when I put out the results, I said, the margin of error is huge on this. The margin of error is, we can't really tell from this. Yes, I show, oh my God, and I cannot remember the candidates' names. They'll come to me later. But I show that the Attorney General is going to win by this margin. But there's a large margin of error. And given that, we can't be sure who actually is ahead. But they took the numbers that we had and ran with those in some of the media. And so where people thought it might not be a close race, it turned out to be a nail biter. But the one that I predicted would win still won.
Okay, so we'll count the A.
Yeah.
A win is still a win.
Yeah,
Give
yeah.
a perfect record still.
Yeah.
So inversely now, what are some of the...
Can I just tell you, I'm going to interrupt because I want
No,
to
you're fine.
say something.
You're the
And
guest. We're here for you.
Castleton. So there's an organization, 538.com was this organization. They study polls and they do a lot of public forecasting, election forecasting. And so they had a section where they would rate pollsters and they would base it on the methodology that they use, the absolute margins of error and predictions error and everything like this. And because we were fairly new, for those who had only 2 elections behind them, and it was us, Princeton, and a number of other places, we had the highest rating of any polling organization in the nation at the time. They used letter grades. We had a B plus, and it was based, again, on the methods we used, the transparency we used, and the absolute error involved in our forecasts. And
That's awesome.
yeah, so I mean, we had a good reputation for a short run of time while we existed, and because we had the perfect record, that helped too. Yeah,
That's actually crazy. That's
Yeah.
awesome to hear. So, obviously, again, now that you've given that context, this question probably has 250 answers, but which stand out to you as some of your strongest projections and results with the most accuracy, where you were really down to the money on the dot?
Yeah. 2020 election for BPR, our gubernatorial prediction was within 0.5%
Wow.
for Phil Scott. And yeah, and we were like right on. And the crazy part on this is that we had to do the poll early because they needed the poll to determine who can be in the gubernatorial debates. And so even with that distance from election day, we were able to get it. And I think it was pretty much, Vermont hasn't rejected an incumbent governor since 1962. So, I'm not suggesting it was a risky bet.
Yeah.
But still, it was the
0.5% still
yeah.
a phenomenal margin.
Yeah.
And before we move on, we've talked a lot about your career with the actual polling. Why did you want to become a professor as opposed to just doing the polling and just, doing other things within the field of political science?
Years ago, when I was a graduate student, Gallup had asked me to apply. They were looking for an analyst for the Gallup poll, something I loved. I was kind of when Gallup puts out results, I follow them immediately. I'm always looking at the breakdowns and everything. And so I thought that sounds great. So, but to work at Gallup, you take a fitness test. The idea is, they know what characteristics a good analyst has, and you take this test, and if you match those, then you're in the running for it to be hired in that position. And they do this because they sell these to HR companies all over. They know what qualities make a good stockbroker, what qualities make a good salesman, what qualities make a good field manager, all these different things, right? Yeah. And so I took it, and apparently I didn't match. And they asked, they said, well, we don't normally do this, but try it one more time. And I took it again, and I did not match.
Wow.
And I was talking with a professor of mine, and she was like, what is it you like? And I like talking to others. I like being, and it just turned out I like teaching. I like being with others. I like having these conversations. I'm not a guy who's going to be happy at the end of the day if my life is in a cubicle staring at a screen and putting out output for somebody else. I like a collaborative environment. And it's important to know what our strengths are and what we're good at. And I was in at a Research One institute when I was in that visiting professor position, and it was, I needed to publish or perish. And I realized I'll perish because I want to be upstairs doing the data collection, and I want to be talking with the interviewers and talking with students about the data we're collecting. And that's not necessarily the qualities you need to be a strong writer and publishing at the rate that you need to for tenure. So at the Carl Vinson Institute of Government, I got to do the things that I like to do and teach. And that was really where that was my wheelhouse. It was where I felt strongest. And I just,
Win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's kind of a cliche, but, if you enjoy what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. I do. Monday comes along, I'm thrilled to show up at work. I like what I do.
I've noticed since I've started doing communications and I've really gotten into it, I notice I'm not dragging my feet on Monday to get to class.
Right,
It's
right.
definitely, I feel what you're saying 100%.
And that's great.
And now that we've touched on that, you're very involved on campus on Castleton. And I want to preface, because these next few questions are leading to a final question. Again, if you don't want to answer something, just say, Dom, shut up, or I'll move on, or whatever. Because you're the faculty advisor for the NAACP, correct?
That's correct.
How did that happen? And I don't mean to ask it in that manner, but I was surprised when I heard that.
Okay, you mean, how did an old white guy become the faculty advisor?
Effectively, somewhat, yeah. How did this happen?
We during the George Floyd demonstrations and such, there was a movement by a student, Ray Owusi, to raise the Black Lives Matter flag here on our campus. And he got a lot of pushback. He didn't get a lot of support from the administration. It got ugly. There were some racist emails that Ray received. From that, Ray thought he really wanted to start a chapter, a student chapter here on campus. And and to be a faculty advisor for an NAACP, you have to be a member of the local branch. Well, I was a member. I've been a member since the Rutland branch started.
What year was that?
That would have been 2020.
Oh,
yeah,
wow, okay.
yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and so I was kind of the natural there, and Ray and I worked with a colleague in admissions to get it started, and then as Ray moved out. It takes a while to move the chapter through the national organization. Ray was gone before it happened, and Tajay Edwards, who was one of the founding members, along with, I hate forgetting people's names. I'm going to come back to her in a moment. She's an active member of the branch right now too, and names just slipped from me. But Tajay and his colleague here, they got. Finally, it started. We got chartered membered here, and they get to vote on who who would be their advisor, but they don't have a choice too broadly because it has to be a member of the branch. And so they kept me on, and it's something I feel passionate about, something I enjoy doing.
It's awesome to hear.
And so that's how that came about.
Okay, so moving into this, it's come to my attention that Castleton.
I know where this is going.
I figure we are starting a Turning Point USA chapter soon, and I was told you are the. I don't know, has it started or you were the faculty?
It has. Right? It has started. It's been approved. I am, as far as I know, the faculty advisor on record. We haven't met yet, but the current president had asked me. Somebody had asked me if I would do it, and I thought about it and got back to him and said, yeah, I'll do it. I don't have to be on I'm passionate that students have the opportunity for ideological diversity and that they're able to say, I may be the only person in the country, and I'm almost willing to bet it, that is the faculty advisor for both an NAACP
That's why
and
I
Turning
had to
Point
ask.
USA,
I read
right?
that.
But I was asked to do this, and I feel like I can support students even when I don't agree with all of the politics. And I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I've tried as a political science scholar to keep my politics out of a lot of the work I do. I've had students leave here who thought I was a good conservative, and I've had students leave here thinking I was a good liberal. And and that's probably a win for me that they're not always clear on what my politics are.
100%.
And to be honest, Dom, I'm not always clear what my politics are too. I struggle and I think about it. I love this field because it's complicated. It's we can put on a jersey and pretend we're on one team or another, but eventually you have to understand the issues that are confronting you, and things are not always perfectly black and white or easy to understand, and sometimes there's a definite moral question and a definite moral answer, and sometimes there's a lot of gray. And I'm comfortable with the gray. I like living in the gray. And I think I could do both and serve the students in both organizations well. And, also trying to maintain the values that we have at VTSU at Castleton, the Castleton way.
So follow-up questions.
Sure.
And again, if I want to preface, I'm only asking because, like you said, this is it was very interesting to me when I heard you were the faculty advisor for both.
Uh-huh.
Charlie Kirk, the guy who founded it, we all know about him, was on record saying things like, prowling blacks go around for fun to target white people. That's a fact. It's happening more. That was the Charlie Kirk Show, 2023, May 19th. Islam is the sword the left is using to slit the throat of America. That was September 8th, 2025. Just so people understand, he had some very strong views. 2 questions, but I'll start with this. Do you feel as if the progression socially of awareness of one of these groups on campus equates to the regression of the other, or no? You don't feel that way at all?
I don't think it is necessarily the case. No, I do not. Everything you the quotes, I'm not.
They're also out of context. Those are just the.
No, but even out of context, I mean, that is accurate. And if you ask me, am I going to support, Charlie Kirk's views here? No, it's antithetical to it denies the existence of our trans students, it's harmful and hurtful. But if you go on to Turning Point USA and the website, and this is what I did before I agreed to be the chapter's faculty advisor, and I just read the basic statement about what their objectives are. And they're pretty benign. They're about, kind of promoting a conservative view. I'm all for ideological diversity, that we should have more conservative views articulated, so that, we don't get stronger by staying in our bubble. You're a wrestler. You don't build muscle by putting no weights on the end of the barbells. That's right? 100%. We have to have resistance, and we have to have difficult conversations, and there has to be that tension for us to grow and for us to have this. The other part of our problem with the hyper-polarized political environment that we have is that we talk only to those we agree with. And we need to break that pattern. We need to have difficult conversations and civil conversations with people with whom we disagree. And having a Turning Point USA chapter on campus might actually have a venue for that point of view, and to have a conversation among students who say Turning Point shouldn't be on this campus, or Turning Point is antithetical to to the rights of women or of trans people or people of color, I think having that conversation makes us a stronger community and helps us bridge these gaps that polarization has created.
Thank you. That was a beautiful answer. Have any of your students from the NAACP or from Turning Point, have any of them had any grievances regarding the other, or no? Have they been pretty respectful of each other? Or obviously, I'm not asking you to say
I'm not going to
names.
tell you. I'm not going to tell you any conversations that I've had with
Yeah,
students
yeah.
because that wouldn't be right. But we would be wholly naive to believe that somebody who's committed to the NAACP wouldn't have a sort of WTF moment when they heard that there was a Turning Point chapter coming to campus, right? That's kind of a natural reaction. I'm going to tell you something that just, outside of this, I was at the Rutland branch meeting for the NAACP, and I told them that I was the advisor also for Turning Point. And wow, jaws drop, but, it is not a natural sort of thing there. And I think above, my commitment to the NAACP is real. I think they are promoting American values. I think they are that's the oldest civil rights organization in the country, and I'm committed to the work that they do. That being said, I also, when I step onto this campus, I work for you, I work for the students, and I am committed to creating the best environment and the best learning environment for my students that I can. And I think doing this is consistent with that latter goal to help students develop and create affinity groups that allow them to explore their views and then bring them out to the community.
Thank you. I think that's an awesome answer. And, I was just really curious because when I was reading, I was like, that is a wild mix. But I really think you articulated that in a really digestible and...
At a larger institution, this wouldn't be the case.
Yeah.
Right? And I want the students to have the advisor that they want. And I want the students to have an advisor who is committed to them. And I may not be the best choice for either of those groups, but that's up to them. Either one of them could decide to have a different faculty advisor. That's up to those groups.
Well, obviously you're doing a good job if you're still on with both of them. And, moving forward, like, trying to phrase this carefully within our last 15, 20 minutes here, I just want to get your take on some things we have going on in America right now, especially as a political science. I notice that compared to a lot of other countries, at least from people I've talked to, at least, and again, my extent of that kind of knowledge is people I talk to and play video games with it from other countries and stuff, not political science professors from other countries. I notice that when I talk to people, there's a very Republican versus Democratic view, and they don't really acknowledge a lot of the other political ideologies as even existent. You notice that, or has that been something you've seen in America, like where it's just Republicans versus Democrats?
Yeah.
And it's just me versus you, red versus blue.
Well, there was a time in our politics, Tom, where I might be a Democrat, you be a Republican, and but we go to the same church. Or I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, but we're playing the same softball league or this and that. And there was these overlaps, right? And ways that we would communicate together. Liliana Mason has this book, Uncivil Discourse, or Uncivil Disagreements.
Okay.
But the essentially what she finds, she does a lot of research in the demographics, and it's now not just that we Democrats and Republicans are of different parties. They also go to different churches. They shop at different stores. They send their kids to different schools. They They are in different after school. Their kids are in different after school events. There is no overlap anymore, and they share far less in common. And we've become tribalized now. And the party is just a label that we can put to it. Because the party almost has no meaning anymore. When the Republicans, the party of free trade, the party of Ronald Reagan, is supporting tariffs, and the Democrats, the party of kind of the outsider, and are the ones who are supporting retaining institutions and the old style of governance, and so everything's kind of been flipped on its head because we're thinking so often with our midbrains. What team am I on? Whose jersey am I wearing? Do I agree with that guy? Well, let me see what team he's on, and I'll tell you whether I agree with him or not, rather than hearing what he's saying.
I've also noticed when we watch, I see clips a lot. Just so you know, we got about 10 to 15 minutes left.
All right.
It's 3:06. But I notice when I watch old clips from presidential debates from before I was born, they were much more respectful.
Absolutely.
What was his? I forget his name. It might have been John McCain. I forget. It was.
I know the moment you're talking about. It was he's at a town hall and somebody says, "I'm afraid of Obama. He's a Muslim. He's a terrorist."
Yes.
And John McCain takes the microphone respectfully. He says, "No, ma'am, he's not. He's a
Exactly.
good American. I disagree with him on a number of policy issues. I think I would be a better president than him." But he's a good family man. He's a good American.
So you hit it right on the head. That was exactly what I was talking about.
And that was 2008. You can watch the debate, the Romney-Obama debates in 12, and they spoke respectfully of each other. They had at least felt that the other may disagree with them, but they wanted to do what they believed was in the best interest of the country. The idea that one candidate hates America, that was just absurd. It was crazy, and so our politics have changed dramatically around that. We also had candidates who ran because they said they would work across the aisle and work with the other party, and that was a popular thing at one point to run on. Now we want to make sure that you won't work across the aisle, that you won't cave, that you're going to stand up for your party and your team.
I noticed that. I noticed that too a lot. Exactly what you said, and again, I got to be careful with how I phrase some of these questions because I'm not claiming to be anywhere near, not even a smidgen as educated as you in any aspect of politics. I'm just talking from things I notice, and if I say something that to you is overtly wrong, don't be afraid to embarrass me on it or tell me. I notice. I noticed the shift, to at least when I'm watching the clips and I'm looking at the dates, kind of started around, like you said, that was 2012. It seemed like it was 2016 around when Trump and Hillary started running that it really got bad, and I'd hate to pin it on one person, but it seems to me as if a lot of that was kicked off by Donald Trump, especially when he would go on, and I believe it was Elizabeth Warren, he was calling her Pocahontas because she's like slightly Native American.
No, she claimed to be.
Yeah,
she claimed to be for some financial aid form way back when because her mother had told her there was some Native American.
Yeah, a good 1%, but things like that I saw. So, how do you feel about that? And again, I'm not going to say it's all Donald Trump's fault, but Donald Trump has poisoned our political discourse, I think, tremendously. But I think Donald Trump is more of a product of what happened. I think it was really back like 1992, 1994 when the Republican minority leader at the time, Newt Gingrich, decided that it was better to oppose the Democrats at every point rather than try to compromise and get something done for the Republicans as a minority party. And so scholars, Ornstein and Mann, they're two scholars. They wrote this book called "It's Actually Worse Than It Looks," and they trace it back to kind of that at the start of this
massive polarization that we see today. Donald Trump really, there may have been a fire going, a little bit of a fire going. Donald Trump is the gasoline that was poured on it, and you recognize, you saw the flames because it was impossible to miss in 2016. The nicknames, the lies, and you suggest that it seemed to be mostly one side than the other. That just cannot be denied just by doing, by simple counts. That the Republicans Party and Donald Trump in particular have engaged in more of this than not. A majority of Republicans still believe the 2020 election was stolen. And all the data show, all the information, not just that Republican chosen jurists in the courts have thrown out those cases and suggesting that there's nothing to any of this. It may have been one of the most transparent elections we've ever had. And so, the people who have continued to perpetrate this lie have done huge damage to voter confidence in the electoral system. And, I hate to say this, but I'm almost of the opinion that it's more important that Americans think the elections are fair than that the elections actually be fair. Because, ideally, they think they're fair and they are fair.
Yeah,
but if we don't believe in our elections anymore, if we don't believe it's a fair system, it justifies bad behavior, including January 6th, which was, there's a part of me that thinks you've got these yahoos out there vandalizing the Capitol building that they think they're saving America. That's because it was all premised on a lie, on false information, and it's just sad.
Yeah, and we have about 9 minutes left, or 8 minutes, so I will hit this topic, and then because this one might take a while, if it takes too long, we can move into our conclusions. But I wanted to ask if you had any statements or thoughts on the influence of IPAC in our Congress, which is something I've been looking into a lot recently. The American
Israeli.
Yes.
Yeah.
So many of them, and people think again this is a one-side issue. There's trackers now. So many, more than half. It's such a high margin of people that are Democratic, Republican, even independent are getting money from IPAC.
Yeah.
And they're not registered as a foreign. They're registered as, I forget the other category.
It's a domestic, yeah.
Yeah, they're not registered as a foreign entity, even though they're doing work directly on behalf of the Israeli government.
And let me just say, there have been, we've had Italian American groups that really helped to promote our relations with Italy and Irish American group. So it's not entirely unique, but there's never been any PAC that has been as powerful though in that regard as AIPAC. And there was a time too, Dom, where we could say, I don't agree with Israeli policy. It wasn't a statement that suggested you had harbored any bad opinions of Jewish people or the state of Israel. 100%. You disagreed with the government. It's been turned and weaponized such that now some people, by expressing horror at what happened in Gaza, and if you don't express horror at what happened in Gaza, you're not looking at this carefully enough.
That's my next question.
And you can be critical without being anti-Semitic. This is bad not just for the people of Gaza. It's bad for all the people in the Middle East, including Jewish people and Arab people. And we can't conflate those two issues, right? And it's being done far too often now. Because
anti-Semitism is very real.
It's very real.
It is very real.
Yeah, and the great irony is that Tucker Carlson interviews Nick Fuentes, who is a out and out, non-apologetic anti-Semite, and he is a player in the Republican Party and MAGA movement. And yet it's the right who's tried to weaponize anti-Semitism against the left for the most part. Again, it's real. It's happened on the left. But it's happened on the left in far smaller numbers than it has happened on the right.
And that was another question. Is I don't mean to be blunt, but I was going to say, would you go as far as to agree that Israel is using some of that power to kind of cover up, or I won't even...
The Netanyahu government is...
Yes. Not Israel as in the citizens, thank you. The government directly, Netanyahu as a prime minister, I should have specified, not citizens that are trying to live their life in Tel Aviv and go to the store and do normal things, send their kids to school.
Yeah.
The government, because to me it seems, and I will say, to me it seems directly like they're trying to cover up their genocide using these influences and this money.
Yeah, and, I don't know when we became so stupid that we can't believe that October 7th was horrific.
It was bad.
Attack against the Jewish people, and that nobody should have in any way excused the behavior of Hamas. And Hamas is awful to many Palestinians as well.
100%. Jihadist is not good.
Yeah.
It's not good in any degree.
And so that's not inconsistent to say that October 7th is bad, and so is the decimation of Gaza and
the whole country.
Yeah, and and just what children are coming back to as they resettle there during this ceasefire, which God we hope is a permanent status.
I follow a lot of pages on Instagram of kids in them. There's these two brothers who post, and then there's another guy who posts with them, and they're all friends, and they go to a gym. And it's wild because, I don't know if you're familiar with the Fallout franchise of video games. It looks like the Fallout games are about an alternate reality where after the Cold War we dropped bombs, us in China. So everything's always destroyed. The world's always, messed up. It looks like worse than Fallout. Yeah. It looks worse than the video game. Yeah. He's in the gym lifting, and you can see out the window, and it's all rubble. It's just all you can see, as far as you can see, is just buildings and dust. Yeah. And it's insanity.
Yeah, no, there is no light which we can put on Gaza that is not just horrific at this time, and that the international community has a lot of work to do to repair what has been done.
I got nervous putting those questions down, but I appreciate your honest answers. Some people don't. Some people like to kind of put nuance there or dance around it, but regardless of what your stance was, thank you for answering them honestly. And we're hitting 3:18, so I'll wrap it up soon.
Great.
But before I conclude, I just want to say I highly recommend listeners read up on some of Dr. Clark's literature and research. As we said earlier, the VPR 2020 primary polls were really interesting to read. And some that I noticed was Let's Focus on What Matters, which was a piece on political mentality and analysis of how people sometimes look at winning and losing as opposed to
issues.
As to the policies that will benefit.
Yeah.
And you can read that on his LinkedIn page via at Rich Clark. And then another one I noticed, I think this might have been your thesis because this is on UConn's page, legislative strategy and the politics
That's
of
my
passing,
dissertation,
passing,
victories at the margin.
Passing controversial foreign economic legislation, which is about times that presidents have passed foreign economic policies that didn't seem to reflect public sentiment.
Right.
And you can read that via digitalcommons.lib.uconn.edu. That's a really nice read. I highly recommend you guys check him out. If you're looking for his work, I believe your full name is Richard Lawrence Clark.
When I publish, it's always Richard L. Clark. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
People know me as Rich, though.
Okay. I highly recommend. And in conclusion, this has been Dominici Lapierre and Professor Richard Clark for episode 5 of D3, Dominici's Discussions and Debates, your source of discord, and everything in between. Thank you, Dr. Clark, for being with me. I loved having you. This was one of my favorite episodes.
Fun for me, too.
And please consider checking out our Instagram account at D3 Radio and Podcast, all lowercase, using the number 3, not the word. Also, consider subscribing to our YouTube channel for re-uploads, exclusive interviews, and access to our pilot episodes. Pilot episode 1 is uploaded now with Professor Paul Derby. The others will be up soon. We had some technical difficulties, but fortunately we got through them, so they're in the editing process now. Our YouTube username is Dominici's Discussions and Debates, using an ampersand, not the word and. The YouTube handle is D3 Radio and Podcast. That's D-3, capital R in radio, capital P in podcast. The links to the YouTube and Insta are in the bios of each other and vice versa. We air live and taped episodes via the platform TuneIn Sports and Music. We typically air 2 p.m. on Tuesdays and 5 p.m. on Thursdays. However, stay tuned on the Instagram, as we are probably going to have some schedule fluctuations later in this week due to scheduling. Thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully I'll see you guys all again very soon.